Namaste. Welcome to Urban Chatterati. This is Abhinav Prakash. And today I'm joined by Akanksha Arora, who is the member of Indian Economic Services and is currently working as the Deputy Director in the Ministry of Finance. Welcome, Akanksha.
Thank you.
So, Akanksha, when we are looking at the month of March in 2021, we cannot help but recall what happened last year. It's almost 1 year that we had this pandemic spreading in India and the lockdowns were imposed in India, and the government came up with lots of economic responses as well. So many people after 1 year say that the response of the government has been good, has been successful, but there are a lot more people who say that it was not good enough or it was, let's say, an economic disaster. And many people say that the government did not had any strategy at all to deal with the pandemic. How do you look at that? Was there an overall strategy behind the steps taken by the government?
Yeah, so that's I think first of all, this is like a really pertinent time to have this discussion. We are almost 1 year past where we started facing this crisis in India. It was March 2020 where we started seeing some increase in cases, and we had that national lockdown, and all that was announced. So I'll really like to take a few minutes and explain how the government did undertake the strategy that it took over the last 1 year. And I'll take you through some steps of how we went about taking those decisions and how it panned out. So first of all, this is a crisis which you can, in economic survey also we call it something called a synchronized recession. So this is basically a thing which affected not just India but like everyone across the world. Almost all countries were affected by it. In I think 90% of the countries did face some contraction in GDP per capita in this year 2020. So yes, this was like a huge crisis that was faced by everyone, and all countries, including India, at all levels, state level, central level, everybody tried to, do whatever was possible at that time and take measures so as to alleviate the hardships or the problems faced by people, faced by the economy. So if you think how Indian government did undertake this response, you can clearly see that we followed something that many people in the government also have termed as something called as a barbell strategy, where we tried to hedge for the worst. If you remember, in March 2020 and the time around that, there were many people who had forecasted that India, being a very highly populated country, densely populated country, and a huge demand on the limited resources we have, would be very badly affected in terms of a huge loss of life and medical issues that will come up. So the first strategy was to impose like a lockdown so as to hedge for the worst, to try and contain for the the spread of the disease, and simultaneously prepare for tackling it, whether be it doing whether be it for PPE kits, whether it be it for testing kits, being for other medical facilities, containment facilities, everything. So we try and hedged for the worst outcome so that you can protect your population to be getting affected by it. I mean, you can try and protect less people are affected by it, and then prepare for this simultaneously. In terms of the response to support the economy, there were the responses came in few tranches. Yes, the response that happened in India was slightly different than what happened in other countries. We did not go for like a one time big stimulus like many developed countries did. Instead, the strategy was to, as we moved forward during the pandemic, the strategy was to keep spending money or keep taking measures that were thought by the government, by the policymakers, which were important at that time. For example, early in March and April, the focus was more on cushioning the impact on the vulnerable section. So whether be it giving some exemptions to agriculture sector so that the harvesting cycle is not affected, sowing cycle is not affected, higher allocation to MG Narega, or probably providing food to crores of beneficiaries, DBT transfers to vulnerable population. But And that was a time, mind you, it was a complete lockdown. So even if you were putting money in hands of people, they were not doing discretionary spending. In high uncertain times, you don't expect people to go out and do like discretionary spending. So what was happening, so at that time, this is what happened. As we moved towards gradual unlocking, like where some activities were allowed and some movement was allowed, the support started shifting towards even taking measures so that MSMEs can stay afloat, and providing liquidity support to MSME, to businesses, to NBFC, and giving and creating an environment where we were trying to promote investment by different schemes like PLI, production linked incentive schemes. So the strategy was not to like put one foot on the brake and the other on the accelerator. The strategy was initially cushion the impact, and then as you're taking one foot away from the brake slowly and slowly, then we started accelerating it. In fact, if you see the capital expenditure and overall expenditure number of government from past few months, you see a very sharp pickup in that. So it has been a part of overall strategy that as you are gradually unlocking, you're supporting the economy in terms of making an environment where now you're supporting the private sector to come up and like start investing, start growing again.
What about those packages of reforms announced by the government? Many people have said that this is a second 1991 movement, and some people say this is not 1991 movement because that was implemented because IMF gave you a paper list that do these things. But this is something that the government has implemented based on its own conviction that the post-pandemic world will be completely different from the pre-pandemic world.
So a lot of people have written about it that post-pandemic world is not going to be a return to the pre-pandemic world. So it's not that like things as soon as the COVID crisis or this thing is going to subside, we are going to go back and start seeing the world in a way where it was before COVID started. And it is very important to kind of like it's important thing to note that India has undertaken a huge slew of structural reforms in the past 1 year, be it the labor reforms. I don't know one reform that goes unnoticed is mostly the OSP reforms for BPO sector. Because we are a service-led economy, because we have the potential, we have the labor force, we have the know-how to become like even bigger player in this sector called in this BPO sector. So government liberalized that sector quite this thing, and then you liberalized your FDI regime quite a bit. So there were a lot of reform measures that were, in a lot of them were in pipeline from a very very long time. It's not like they were thought about right now. Various committees had, like for the OSP reform, I'm saying TRI had come up with a report many years ago that this should have been done. So a lot of these were being discussed for a lot of time, but at this particular time, a together, apart from just giving a push to aggregate demand. So one thing I'll again like to explain, since I'm an economist, I like to use few terms: aggregate demand, aggregate supply. So when you see that your economy is affected badly, so you are so the obviously the role of government was to come in and support it. One way to support it could have been to help push the aggregate demand, which happens when you do direct benefit transfers, you give employment to people and all that. That is one side of the story. The other side of the story is supply. So that is equally important, because if you have supply side disruptions, in a few months time, in some lag time, you'll start seeing some extra pressure on inflation. You start see some kind of disruptions. You'll start seeing that your supply chains are affected. So a lot of supply side measures were taken in this time, apart from just taking direct aggregate demand measures. Your production linked incentive schemes, or the schemes, the liquidity supports that you were giving to MSME so that they can stay afloat, they can keep doing business, the labor reforms that were undertaken, all of these are a part of smoothing the supply chains, so that your supply side keep getting is strengthened, and the recovery that you get, the way you come out of this problem is more sustainable. It's not like a short term recovery that you get, but it's like a more longer term or a more sustainable recovery to get. So I think that's the idea where you try to balance both, obviously pushing giving some push to demand, but also looking at supply side measures.
Yes. But that also brings us to this entire question of the fiscal policy of the government. So, what was the thought process behind the fiscal policy of the government, and how it was different from what the countries like US or UK were doing at that time?
Yeah. So one very big difference, like I said, was that we did not do a one-time big package like together. The way it happened was in small tranches, as it was deemed that probably this is going to be more helpful at this particular time. So, like I said, initially you wanted to spend more money on cushioning the impact on people who were the worst affected by the pandemic. Then you also wanted to spend more money on creating an environment where again the private sector starts investing, starts producing, because eventually that is how the recovery has to happen, so that people, keep getting employed, the production happens, and a chain of multiplier starts happening. So once the private sector starts spending, so the response, the fiscal stimulus mix basically changed drastically over the last 1 year. In economic survey, we did analysis. In if some of the audience is keen, they can actually go and look at the fiscal chapter of volume 2 of economic survey, where we basically told how the stimulus mix changed over the year, and you can see there was a large shift. Initially more of the money was going on dbt transfers and providing food to vulnerable section. Then slowly and slowly, you see, by the october november, you see a large amount of money being going to investment promotion activities, and a large capital expenditure done by government. This is one thing I think which really is noteworthy, that not only that we did ramp up our expenditure, but the quality of expenditure is also kept in mind, in the terms that capital expenditure, which means you're creating more assets, creating infrastructure, which will not just add to the economic recovery right now, but will also be very beneficial for long term. Basically, you're creating infrastructure which will have a lot of supply side benefits and overall improvements in the atmosphere of doing business and industrial activity in future. So capital expenditure of government has picked up. I'm talking about central government, has picked up quite substantially in the last few months. In fact, like for some months, it was about more than 100% growth over the previous months of last year. So, and even for the coming years, if you notice that the budget has laid out fiscal path where the spending plans are much bigger than they were thought of probably pre-pandemic times. The fiscal path that was thought of, the fiscal expenditure path has been thought of now as much expansion is much more than that. And there has been consistently a lot of effort on a focus on infrastructure and capital expenditure. If you see roads, railways, highways, even water transport, so there is a lot of focus on spending on that. That is so it's not a like trivial thing, because if you're spending and you're spending on these things, you're building assets which will not just help your recovery right now, but they're kind of reforms that are going to pay off for like a very long time as well.
Exactly. And that brings us to this entire question of debt sustainability. Because we're spending such large amount of money, the government is taking so much of loans. Is it sustainable in the long run, or we are going to see a repeat of what happened after the financial crisis in 2008?
So, yeah, I think that's a very important question. And before the budget, I think even in economic survey, we devoted a full chapter this year to analyze what kind of fiscal strategy should a government or a country undertake when you're faced with situations like this, and how does India fare as compared to other countries when we come to dealing with these issues. And of course with that, so I'll just take like few minutes to explain the rationale behind it, because most of the people, when they think about fiscal deficit, when they think that you're spending more, the first question everybody tells is that, even so you're borrowing today to spend, who is going to repay that? And if your repayment, this thing becomes even larger, so that means you're putting a burden on the future. This thing, that's not a sustainable strategy. But you have to understand one very important thing. When you talk about debt sustainability, debt absolute amount is not the thing you're looking at. You're basically looking at a debt ratio. And what is a debt ratio? Debt is a debt to GDP ratio. When And it's very crucial to understand that when you talk about debt sustainability, growth is very important there. I'll just give a very simple example. For example, I take 100 rupees loan today because I think that my business needs it. I need to stay afloat, or I need to, undertake some activity. So I take the loan of 100 rupees at 4% rate of interest. So I'm going to pay back 104. But if I put that 100 rupee to a productive use and I get 108 back, so basically I get that 4 extra as well. I can repay and then I get some benefit as well. So that's the whole idea about debt dynamics. When you take debt today, eh, first of all, how what all factors affect your debt sustainability? Firstly, what is the amount of debt that you have as of today? Then the new debt that you're taking today, and the rate of interest you're going to pay on it, and the returns you get on that. So as long as the returns that you get on that keep being higher than that of uh, being higher than the rate of interest that you're going to pay, your debt is going to be sustainable. So at this point of time, if the government does not support the economy, see, the private investment obviously in such uncertain times is going to be low unless there is some demand boost that they get. Obviously private consumption is affected because people, first of all, some people have had a income loss. Secondly, in uncertain times, people don't want to go out and spend on discretionary items. They try and push their discretionary spending. Obviously exports are affected because it's like a worldwide phenomena. So government spending is the only way with which you can balance out this thing. And government expenditure, when government does some spending, it not just has a fiscal multiplier effect in the sense that it creates a chain. If government today is building a bridge, let's say, so it's going to hire some people, it's going to procure some material. So those people who from whom you are procuring some material will again hire some people, procure some so it's a chain, it's a multiplier, it's a direct multiplier effect that have. And then it creates a enabling environment, it creates some confidence in the economy for private sector to also come in and start spending. So that is one thing. And if you're not doing that and your growth is badly affected, your debt sustainability is as it is going to be threatened. So growth is the key here. Whenever we're talking about debt dynamics, we have to understand that if your growth falters, your debt sustainability is also already you're going to face some issues there. So growth is important. And while doing this analysis for economic survey, we found that in US and UK, the correlation between private spending and public spending was really high. So they were following much stronger counter cyclical fiscal policies than we have up till now ever. So there is a high, I think this was so it was aptly said that this was the time where we really needed a strong counter cyclical fiscal policy, which was the need of the hour and which will take into
Can you
account
please
the debt.
explain for the audience what does the counter-cyclical policy actually means? Because yeah, everyone is not an economist like you.
Yeah, yeah, right. Sorry. So a counter-cyclical fiscal policy, when I say, it simply means that when the private sector, either investment or consumption business cycle basically is on the downfall. So when you see that the private sector investment is low, or you're in the negative side of the business cycle, then the government steps in by two ways. Either first, it increases their expenditure, which adds to the GDP. Like I said, for example, they build a bridge, they do some transfers to the society. That's an increase in government expenditure. The second way usually it is done is reducing taxes, because when taxes are reduced, then again people have more money in their hands to spend. This is called as counter cyclical fiscal policy. This has an opposite side also, that when you go on the opposite side, when there is a boom at that time, government reduces its spending a bit, tightens its fiscal strings, and balances the cycle. So this is called as counter cyclical, that whichever side the cycle is, you take an opposite stand. When the economy needs it, the spending is low, you step in and spend more. When it's the opposite side, you spend less. At this particular time, when you had a contraction of about 25% in quarter 1 of 2021, contraction of 8% in quarter 2 of 2021, this was a time where government did undertake a huge, like there was a conscious policy decision that was taken to undertake a counter-cyclical fiscal policy. If you see that the budgeted numbers for the previous budget, which was done before anybody knew that COVID will become such a huge thing, that numbers and the revised numbers that you get are very, very different. So there has been a lot of fiscal spending that has happened last year, and it was required, both on spending on health front and then supporting the economy as well. And that is what has been the path has been laid out for the next few years as well.
Hmm. Also, when we talk about the reforms, the government has undertaken lots of reforms last year and also this year in the budget. What is this reforms all about? Is it just about privatization and monetization, or are we looking at something much more fundamental beyond that?
See, I'll just so when you talk about reforms being undertaken, they are not, most of them are not standalone reforms. So just take an example of FDI policy liberalization. If you see from the past 3-4 years, in fact, FDI policy has been liberalized consistently in parts. So let's say an analysis has been done that this sector you can do some liberalization, you can allow some more FDI in this sector, you can remove some controls. So gradually this has been liberalized, and now various sectors you have more FDI that has been allowed. Similar thing is for ease of doing business. So a lot of measures have been taken for improving the ease of doing business from last various years, and you see some improvement in even the World Bank rankings that have come up. So like for example, your labor laws, you had like, I think 49 central laws which have now changed into four. I may be wrong in the exact number, but now they have been converted into four codes. So this has a huge implication for how business can be done. This has a huge implication for simplification for the requirements that business sector need to fulfill to do business in India. And that is very important because you need businesses, and there's a long standing effort that the government has been doing to push manufacturing in India. So you need to make an environment where it's easier for people to come set up their business in India, do business in India. So these are not standalone reforms. If you see, they're all linked to a particular aim that you're having. So when you're saying you want manufacturing, everybody knows that India has been a service-led economy. Manufacturing is like a smaller this thing. So there is a aim that you want some manufacturing to pick up in India, so that it obviously lead it, so whatever it leads to more employment, it will help. You want that. So there have been various, so for example, your production link incentive schemes, the measures that you're taking, ease of doing business, the it's not just that everything is linked to privatization or something like that. It's a more broader agenda of undertaking structural reforms. And again, I like to reiterate that they a lot of them are like real big structural reforms that have the potential to change how the economy functions. So like for example, labor laws are implemented on those people who are a part of formal labor net. And there was a law that many committees had written that you need to reform this so that more and more people can come in the formal net of labor laws. So now with this, that can help more people come in the formal net. Businesses, it can help businesses to expand. So what I want to say here is that a lot of these reforms are linked. They are not just a standalone these individual reforms that have taken. And the broad agenda is to help like basically to push the economy back to a high growth uh, path.
Yeah, Kancha. So we have undertaken so many reforms, but I'm coming to the last question, which is on everyone's mind. Are there any signs of economic recovery yet? Or the numbers which are being projected by the government, by the other bodies, is simply the base effect?
So I'll divide this question into two parts. One is that, see, base when you're talking about base effect, that is what you're talking for next year, not for this year. Base effect, so what do you mean by base effect? How do you calculate a growth rate? It's simply this year's number divided by last year's number minus 1 multiplied by 100. So when I'm saying, when you're talking about the current financial year that is going on, when you're talking about those numbers, they are not affected by your base effect. in fact they have a negative base effect, right? Because the COVID thing started unfolding in 2021, 2021. So India's financial year is April 2020 to March 2021, right? So basically this year's recovery that you're seeing is not because of base effect. You see, we entered a slightly, so basically in Q3 you had a slight positive GDP growth. I'm not saying that's like a huge thing, but at least you came out of the contractionary zone that you were in for the past 2 quarters, Q1 and Q2. So you see some signs of recovery there, and they are not because of the base effect. When people are talking about the base effect, that is for the next year. So when you see a lot of commentary that India is going to be the highest growing, going to go back to become the highest growing economy in 2021-22. So April 21 to March 22, that year, Moody's, IMF, various international and national agencies have forecasted that the growth level will pick up to double digits next year. That some people are saying that it's a base effect because it was a low effect like that. But if you even ignore that overall GDP number, you see a lot of high frequency indicators have started showing some recovery. You see GST collection from I think December 2020 onwards, you had GST collections which were higher in absolute amount than the previous year. I think December, I'm very sure I'm not, but you see there's some pickup in GST revenue collections. Then you see some pickup in your cargo traffic numbers by railways and by port as well. Then you see the PMI index that come every month. You see a lot of high frequency indicators, PMI services, that you see a pickup. Even in national accounts, the contraction that you see in Q3 in services sector is much less than it was in Q1. So why I'm saying services and differentiating between different sectors is because when this crisis came, it affected the economy. Obviously, it affected the whole of the world, every economy, but different sectors were affected in a different way. If you go and check the national accounts, you see that services sector had a huge contraction, whereas agriculture managed to still grow at a like decent. I mean, agriculture still managed to remain in the positive territory, right? Why it had happened? Services sector, by definition, a lot of services do require you to go and consume the services. You're going to go out and eat at a restaurant, see a movie, or avail a service. For example, what about the flights? So since the flights were not functioning, so your travel and tourism industry was completely this thing. So services sector, which was completely almost shut down in the first quarter, now you see a lot of unlocking has happened. And in Q3 you see that the number the GDP growth for only the services sector, it had this number had become much smaller, so the contraction was much smaller. So you definitely do some see some recovery in the various indicators of the sector, whether it's from national accounts, whether it's from high frequency indicators. And you should remember that vaccination is one a big ray of hope that we have right now, because as it we're very hopeful that as this gathers pace, it should help support the economy very it should help support the economy further, because that means that uh, that will help pick up demand for certain services and goods more. Obviously this issue is, the game is far from over, because you see the situation unfolds every day. It's a different situation that's happening. But of course, with vaccination in hand and the safeguard measures that we have, very hopeful that this should be like better than, you should see some better recovery. And this has been corroborated by almost everybody. So whosoever had done a projection about few months ago has upgraded your growth projections for next year. Be it IMF, be it Moody's, I think 2 3 days ago did revised up the GDP projection for India for next year. And I mean, I think almost all agencies have done so. So I think we have good reasons to be very hopeful for the
Sure,
future.
sure.
Yeah.
So basically, the Ministry of Finance is very hopeful and optimistic. I hope that the entire economy will feel the same very soon. But thank you, Akansha, for the great work you people are doing in the ministry. And thank you for talking to us. Uh, I will be inviting you again and again over the coming months. I'm sure that you will give your time to our audience.
Thank you so much. I'll be very glad to do so.
Thank you, Kancha.
Thank you.
Thank you, audience, for listening to us. And please don't forget to subscribe to the channel. And also, you can check the membership so you can also join the channel. Thank you once again.
Thank you.